Picture yourself standing on a quiet hillside just outside Niteroi on a winter afternoon in 1966. A breeze slips through the tall grass, carrying the scent of the ocean and the distant hum of the city. You look down and see two men lying side by side, motionless, their faces covered by strange lead masks that look like homemade welding goggles with no lenses. You feel a chill because nothing about the scene makes sense. Who were they? Why are they here? And what could have driven them to die in this eerie, almost theatrical pose? You soon learn their names: Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana, radio technicians from the neighboring town of Campos. By all accounts, they were skilled, friendly, and quietly ambitious. They worked long hours repairing televisions and experimenting with homemade electronic devices. In their free time, they dabbled in spiritualist meetings, intrigued by the idea that radio frequencies could open a channel to something beyond our ordinary world. You begin to sense that the story will only grow stranger the deeper you go. First, let's retrace their final day. In the early morning of August 17th, they boarded a bus bound for Niteroi. They told friends they were buying electronic parts for a quick job. You imagine them chatting on the ride, one balancing a leather satchel, the other scanning the landscape for new antenna designs. They carried a modest amount of cash, a plastic water bottle, and a notebook. Everything looked harmless, almost boring, until you remember the lead masks tucked away inside the bag, waiting for their moment. Hours later, eyewitnesses spotted the pair in a small bar near the bus terminal. They ordered mineral water, not alcohol, and appeared calm. The waiter later said Miguel checked the time repeatedly, as if they were on a strict schedule. They paid the bill, saved the receipt, and walked out into the hazy light of late afternoon. From there, they began the uphill trek toward Vintem Hill, a place with no tourist draw and no clear reason for two technicians to visit. Why choose that spot when dozens of easier meeting points lay closer to town? When their families realized they had not returned by nightfall, they grew anxious. Days passed. On August 20th, a young boy flying a kite on the hill stumbled onto the bodies. Police were called, and the scene quickly drew crowds. You picture the officers stepping carefully through the grass, jotting notes as they studied every odd detail. Each man was neatly dressed in a suit. Each wore the thick lead mask, hand-cut to cover the eyes and nose. There were no signs of violence. Nearby, the notebook waited to deepen the mystery. You lean in to examine the writing. It reads, Sunday, 1/6/14. Be at the decided place at 16:30. Take capsules after the effects. Protect metals. Wait for the Mars signal. The grammar is clumsy, as if hastily scribbled, but the intent is chillingly clear. Take what capsules, protect which metals, and what exactly is the Mars signal? You sense that the line between scientific experiment and occult ritual has blurred, leaving investigators stuck in the middle. Speculation ignited almost instantly. Some claimed the men planned to test a homemade device capable of contacting extraterrestrials. Others whispered that a local spiritualist group had given them a formula for illuminating visions, provided they shielded their eyes from blinding otherworldly light. Still others suggested a simpler but equally grim motive: testing a stash of dangerous chemicals, perhaps a potent anesthetic gas, that tragically went wrong. An autopsy could have offered clarity, yet the bodies were so decomposed after days in Brazil's humidity that toxicology came up empty. No trace of poison, no clear evidence of suffocation, no trauma whatsoever. The lead masks, though heavy, were not airtight, so they would not have suffocated. police were left with a puzzle that refused to yield even a single solid piece. You might ask, why lead? Lead shields against radiation, but it also blocks certain wavelengths of light. If the men expected a blinding flash, whether from an experimental radio wave burst or from something less worldly, the masks would serve as crude goggles. But if that flash never came, they would have lain there, drugged or disoriented, waiting for a sign that never arrived. Imagine realizing in your final lucid moment that the experiment had failed and help was nowhere nearby. Let's weigh the main theories one at a time. First, the toxic gas hypothesis. Supporters point to the empty water bottle and the timing of the capsule note. The men could have ingested a sedative, then inhaled an anesthetic gas released from a canister they later discarded. Their goal might have been an out-of-body experience or simply a test for future experiments. Yet no canister was found, and the autopsy found no clear chemical residue. That doesn't kill the theory, but it weakens it. Next up, the UFO angle. Vintem Hill sits near a rash of mid-60s Brazilian UFO sightings. Witnesses in neighboring towns reported glowing orbs hovering over hillsides, sometimes pulsing in rhythmic bursts. Cruz and Viana, as radio enthusiasts, would have been aware of those stories. They might have believed that certain radio frequencies could attract or even summon these lights. So they donned masks to protect their eyes, took capsules to calm their nerves, and waited. If a craft arrived, maybe the encounter proved fatal. If it never came, they still died, whether from exposure or a pharmacological miscalculation. The UFO theory remains unproven, but it explains why they planned so meticulously around optical protection. A third possibility hinges on spiritualist ritual. The men had visited a local medium weeks earlier, asking detailed questions about astral projection. Manuals from that era often recommended fasting, mild psychedelic ingestion, and sensory deprivation. The lead masks would block light, the capsules would alter consciousness, and the hilltop offered isolation. Perhaps the ritual demanded that they lie perfectly still until spirits arrived. If you believe in such things, it's poetic. If you don't, it's a heartbreaking example of two men chasing transcendence only to find tragedy. Modern forensic science has revisited the case more than once. In 2015, a group of Brazilian criminologists ran computer simulations to test accidental overdose scenarios. They fed archived climate data and body mass estimates into models that predicted how rapidly various sedatives would break down. The results suggested a sedative like scopolamine could vanish from tissue within 72 hours in tropical heat, leaving no trace for autopsy. That aligns with the timeline of discovery. Yet without preserved tissue samples, the theory remains academic. Digital sleuths also combed through newspaper archives and ham radio logs, piecing together Cruz and Viana's final weeks. They found hints of a clandestine club of radio hobbyists exchanging coded messages about illuminated helmets and magnetic experiments. One log entry from August 12th mentions a planned Mars test soon. While provocative, these scraps stop short of proof. They show community interest, but not the deadly result. Now, consider the families. You can hear the tremor in Dona Noza, Miguel's sister, when she recalls opening his closet and finding metal fragments, empty capsules, and scribbled calculations. To her, he was a loving brother who sometimes vanished into projects he refused to explain. She still wonders if someone exploited his curiosity, feeding him half-truths until the line between hobby and risk disappeared. You sense her grief is compounded by the lack of closure. A clear answer would hurt, yes, but at least it would end the guessing. As you sift through the layers, the most unsettling part may be the ordinariness of it all. Two blue-collar technicians, not mad scientists or cult leaders, set out on what they thought was a controlled experiment. They packed water, pocket money, and notebooks, mundane items you might carry on any short trip. They trusted their own calculations and perhaps the words of mentors who promised enlightenment. In that trust, they lost the skepticism that might have saved them. How often do you place similar trust in tutorials, influencers, or forums? The question lingers because it's easier to judge their choices than to scrutinize our own. So where does that leave you, the curious listener? You stand at the crossroads of law and evidence, knowing each path dead ends in uncertainty. If you lean toward scientific mishap, you mourn two tinkerers who pushed a DIY experiment past safety limits. If you favor the supernatural, you picture a blinding light on that hill, one so intense that even lead shields could not spare them. Or maybe the true answer hides in the silent gap between those extremes, a gap filled with half-remembered instructions and the universal human hunger for discovery. Before we part ways, let the image of those masks remain with you. On the surface, they're clunky bits of metal. Look deeper, and they become symbols of ambition without guardrails. They remind you that curiosity, for all its brilliance, can turn perilous if you ignore caution. Next time you chase a mystery, ask yourself, have I built a metaphorical lead mask? Something that shields my eyes yet blinds me to risk? That single reflection may be the lasting legacy of Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana. You arrived on this hill looking for a tidy answer, but the mystery refuses neat packaging. It invites you to question, to dig, and ultimately to accept ambiguity. Perhaps that's why the case still grips true crime fans, podcasters, and late-night researchers. The unknown can frighten you, but it also fuels stories that echo for decades. So keep your curiosity alive. Just don't forget your own safety checklist. After all, some hills are better admired from a distance. When you step away from Vintem Hill tonight, carry two takeaways. First, every unsolved case is a mirror reflecting our urge to know more. Second, mystery itself has weight. It can press on families, on investigators, and on anyone who dives too deep without a lifeline. Stay curious, stay cautious, and remember that some signals should remain unanswered